All right, here we go. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 12th, 2023 regular board meeting. I'd like to announce that meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from the previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. All would like to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time we'll have a brief moment of silent meditation. Roll call, Mr. Longwell.
Mr. Bradley.
Here.
Mr. Burkhardt.
Here.
Mr. Hartman.
Present.
Dr. Lebo.
Here.
Mrs. Maris.
Here.
Ms. Morgan. Dr. Rhodes.
Present.
Mr. Steinker.
Here.
And Mr. Rowe.
Here. 1.06, endorsement of agenda. Any alterations or additions to the agenda tonight, Mr. Longwell?
There are no changes, Mr. Rupp, and the agenda will otherwise stand as written.
Thank you. And 1.07, reading of minutes of regular board meeting of August 8th, 2023. Any board members have any additions or corrections to the board meeting, the minutes from August 8th? Seeing none, then they'll stand as written. Moving on to item 2, hearing of visitors. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. At this time, we have reached the first opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments related to items that are listed on the evening's agenda for a vote. A second opportunity for public comment will occur at the end of the meeting. The second opportunity for public comment is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you'd like to address the board, please share your name and district address. Come up to the podium. It's for items that are on the agenda tonight for a vote. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, reports and presentations. Item 3.01, Superintendent of Schools report, Dr. Leidy.
Well, good evening. As you all know, we were able to recognize outstanding staff performance tonight. This is one of those things that I think truly does exemplify what this school district is about. And I thought Mr. Rupp's words captured very nicely the idea of our community showing up to recognize the excellence that is our staff. And we are very fortunate to have a committed, dedicated staff to the work of helping children. So to be able to recognize them is a big deal. And I'll bet she's not in here, but Chris Haldeman, she in here? She stepped out, didn't she? Chris Haldeman, the executive assistant that works with Andy and me, I just can't say enough for her and the work she did. She was out last week sick for many days, and yet I could see she was on her email trying to still work through it, and she also is an example of outstanding staff. The second item I have is a kind of a generic, how did the beginning of the school year go? And I say generic because I don't have any quantitative data to give to you about this. I can just tell you from my gut and from my heart that this has been the best start in the last 4 years. And I mean that sincerely. Obviously, 20 was a very difficult year. 21 was challenging in and of itself. And last year, it just weren't in the rhythm yet. This year felt really good. Did we have, some of the issues that we typically see at the beginning of the year around transportation and some of the scheduling? Yes. Were people in place to help address those as quickly as possible? Yes. So 2 thumbs up for the beginning of the 23-24 school year. And again, that's about as generic as you can get, but it comes from a good place. The other thing that gets a little more in depth now than just the generic, we had a great start, is what are we looking to be our focus for the 23-24 school year? And to put that in the context of, that's not something we just come up with each year, right? This is based on the work that we've done with our community on the comprehensive plan, and our district goals grow out of that. From these district goals, we work over the summer with our buildings to develop their own goals based on what we're doing as a district. And so Mr. Bitts is going to talk us through the 23-24 district goals.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lighty. It's my pleasure to be able to share with you an update on our district goals. And I say an update because, as Dr. Lighty alluded to, there's lots of things that we do with the rhythm of the school year, and this is certainly something that we try to do with the board at the beginning of each school year. But I think you'll see that our district goals really go beyond just the school year and aren't necessarily the scope of just this school year. We'll talk a little bit about how we've been working on these goals prior to this year and even a little bit beyond. So you'll see that this is a good point to update you in, but certainly these are goals that we've been working on for quite some time. So with that, the items that we're going to talk through first, I'll reorient you with where we are with our comprehensive plan, and then talk about some of the focus areas from that comprehensive plan that we'll be working on this year. But then also talk about some of the additional goals that maybe aren't our specific focus areas this year, but are certainly areas that we're going to continue to do good work in. And also talk to you about some of our goals with administrative induction and a little bit about local accountability. So our comprehensive plan, you've seen different versions of this kind of graphic, or we've talked through this graphic in different ways in the past. And this is a version that I came up with this year, just to remind us of how all these pieces work together. In our last comprehensive plan, we took a deep look at our beliefs, at who we are, who we want to be, what it is that we value. And as we've talked about on a number of occasions, we did some, what I think was outstanding work in being able to bring those beliefs to life again, and to be able to really breathe new life into them, and be able to bring out some areas that we felt were missing within our beliefs, and have some really good discussion about who we want to be as a district. But who we are ultimately then helps to inform what it is that our mission is, and to answer the question of what are our community's hopes and dreams for our students. So beyond the specifics of what we think of sometimes with the standards and some of our instructional strategies and our curriculum, what are our community's hopes and dreams? What are the benefits that they hope to gain for our students out of our program? But then more specifically, of course, what do we want MASD students to know, understand, do, and be like? And we talk about that at each grade level. We talk about that at each grade level band. And certainly, what is it that we want our students to know, understand, do, and be like when they walk across that stage at the end of their time with us? But if that's our goal, if that's what we want our output to be for our systems, then what is it that we as a district have to be doing in order to make that happen? How do we strategically align our systems to achieve our mission? What is that vision? And ultimately, what does our district look like at its ideal best in 5 to 7 years? So trying to look out and say, what do we need to do? What do the systems need to look like in order to achieve our mission? And for all of that, with the comprehensive plan, we get more specific and we say, okay, if this is what we need our system to look like, what are some specific goal areas that we want to devote significant effort towards in the next 3 to 6 years? And it's important to remind ourselves of some of the words there in that question. Significant effort. There's plenty of other things that we're going to be doing outside of just these comprehensive plan goals. There's lots of resources that are going to be devoted to other areas. But when we talk about where do we want to put our time, talent, and treasure, if you will, the most towards, we're talking about these specific goal areas. And that's what we want to dig into a little bit more here tonight. So our comprehensive plan, we're in year 2 of what is officially a 3-year comprehensive plan. But ultimately at the 3-year mark in the past, we have often used that as an opportunity to kind of check where we are with our goals and to be able to reassess and realign a little bit and then be able to roll that into an additional 3-year comprehensive plan. So we'll start that conversation here in the next year about what the next 3 years would look like, but we're in year 2 of this particular plan. So as we go through these focus areas, I'm just gonna, again, reorient you with what does our goal say specifically, and talk a little bit about the action steps we've taken to this point, and then talk some more about our goals and action steps for the year ahead. So I'll give you a second to read that goal statement for curriculum and assessment system development. So a couple words highlighted there: continuous review. We want to make sure that we have a system in place to be able to continuously review our curriculum assessment and instruction system. Something that is also, while a continuous review, also has a rhythm to it so that we can focus on specific curricular areas in different years and be able to devote our time and resources to really digging into a couple curricular areas. Most recently, this past year, we were looking specifically at how we could, as we called it, stabilize our curriculum. How could we take the lessons that we had learned through the couple years of COVID and prioritizing our curriculum? How could we take those lessons learned and apply it to what was our previous, what we called curriculum 1.0? How could we apply those lessons learned to our curriculum to make sure that our curriculum is what our students need it to be moving forward? So we did that last year. We were stabilizing our curricular areas. Secondary did it in all of their curricular areas. At the elementary level, we were focused specifically on stabilizing our math curriculum last year. So the other part to this to highlight is that ensures delivery of a program that prepares students for the future. So obviously last year we spent that time stabilizing our curriculum, and you can see that moving into this year, we're focusing a little bit more on that delivery piece. So first action step for this year, first goal is to enhance instructional delivery in line with curriculum stabilization completed last year. So a lot of work went into stabilizing this curriculum and getting it to a place where we're pretty excited about where it is. So now how can we make sure that our instructional delivery moves alongside of that and continues to improve as well? So again, at secondary, they're doing that in their various departments and those curricular areas in which they teach. And at the elementary, they're focused right now primarily on doing that in math. One of the specific action steps that gets even a little more granular than that is that we really want to focus on how we can review student work to drive continued refinement of curriculum assessment and instruction. So again, last year we spent a lot of time being able to improve our assessments and be able to improve our curriculum. Well, now let's take a minute to be able to see how our students did with that. So let's examine student work and be able to see what is the evidence that's showing us that students are either responding positively to the changes that we've made, or they're not, and we need to continue to go back and refine. So making sure that we take time this year to really dig into student work, being able to share that across teachers, being able to have a collaborative, non-defensive conversation with another teacher and say, here's how my students did, how did your students do, and how can we learn from one another in the evidence that we find. So that's goal 1. Goal 2, again, I'll give you a second to read the goal statement for supporting student needs through instruction. So again, I'll take you to last year to start. Last year in this particular goal area, there's lots of areas that we provide instruction for, obviously. But we identified, and really through the comprehensive planning process, it was identified for us that the area of behavior was one that we really needed to focus on. It would be easy to stand here, and we talked about this previously, it would be easy to stand here and say that that's something due to COVID and due to hybrid learning and those kinds of things. Really, that just shone a brighter spotlight on some issues that we were already seeing even pre-COVID. And this has given us the opportunity to really, for the first time in my 20 years in the district to have a K through 12 conversation about what are our behavioral expectations in our district. What do we expect for all students when it comes to how they can learn and grow in a positive environment in our schools? So this goal really was focused in on behavior, and last year we had a K through 12 committee that got together to be able to identify what are our guiding principles, what do we believe about setting the conditions for learning in our classroom, that we can proactively try to prevent behaviors from happening, negative behaviors from happening, and promote positive behaviors. What do we even mean by behavior? Can we come to a consistent understanding of what it is we're talking about when it comes to behavior, and how does behavior manifest itself in our students? What are some of those things that are creating behaviors? And then ultimately, how do we respond to negative behaviors? What do consequences look like? So we had a K through 12 district level conversation about that. And this year is our opportunity for those guiding principles, to be able to move down to our building level. Last spring, we had a training that involved all K through 12 staff to be able to unveil our guiding principles for behavior support. And now each building is using those guiding principles to launch a positive behavior intervention support team at their school. PBIS is not something new. In fact, it's not even new to our district. Our elementary has been using PBIS teams for quite some time in different ways. So this was an opportunity even for our elementary staff who are familiar with PBIS for it to be more consistent across buildings for the first time. And of course, for our secondary to be able to take a new look at PBIS and how they can develop systems around it as well.
Mr. Biggs, what are some examples of PBIS support? How does the team work in either elementary or secondary?
So I would say that you're looking at what are our expectations as a building. And we talk often about that being at the tier 1 level, meaning that what are our expectations for all students? What do we expect students to do when they come to the cafeteria? What do we expect students to be doing when they're in the hallways? What do those behaviors look like? What are some things that we can do to proactively instruct students on what behaviors in the hallway should look like? What behaviors in the bathroom should look like? So tier 1 spaces, and then ultimately in each classroom, the teacher is able to take those principles and apply it to their own classroom and talk about what does behavior look like for all of us when we're working in a group? What does behavior look like for us when we're reading silently at our desk? What should we be doing? What should our voices sound like? All those kinds of things. So that would be tier 1. The PBIS team is talking about what are those behaviors for everybody. The next step, which goes into the next action step, is beginning to look at what about those students who that's not enough for. The students who, despite that teaching, which we would hope would be supportive for 80% of our students, what about the other 20% that need more structure than that? Do they need some sort of a point system? Do they need some sort of a color-coded card that's helping them to gauge their behavior over the course of the day? Do they need even more support than that? Do they need some sort of an evaluation, perhaps? So all of those may be included in tier 2 and tier 3 supports for those students that aren't responding to what we hope, again, 80% of our students will.
I heard this in back to school night from my son's teacher, and I thought, boy, they're really, she's really focused on behavior. I wasn't, it stuck out to me because I hadn't heard that before, and it's like good to hear that it's, it wasn't just her. It was, district-wide.
Every time you're in the school and you hear the elementary kids say all together, CATS, that's positive behavior support right there. That's a way of tier 1 at a building level, typically in the elementary level, where you're saying this is our signal for us to be able to exhibit X, Y, and Z behaviors. We're all going to say that together, and by the time we finish saying it, then we should all be silent and be listening to the speaker. So that's just one example of what it could look like.
To take his question one step further, and I don't mean to sound ignorant, but
No, please.
this is a great thing. Who makes up the positive behavior intervention support team?
Yeah, so we're using we used At the district level committee, we used a number of different resources. There are all kinds of resources, as you can imagine, out there about what people should look like. We've tapped into a few specifically to be able to say we're really leaning on these. And when we talk about the makeup of our committees at the building level, we're having them led by the building principal or an assistant principal, so administrator in the building. Certainly the school counselor should be a part of that. Certainly some of your interventionists that have expertise in this area, that might be a learning support teacher, that might be an emotional support teacher, might be your social worker. Then there should be classroom teachers that are a part of the team as well. Because we had this district level K through 12 team from that committee, when we designed that committee last year, we made sure that every building was represented on that committee. So those committee members that were part of those conversations and making those decisions last year now are members of their building level teams. So they can now take what we talked about as a committee back to their buildings, in addition to the principals obviously having that knowledge too.
And because we're talking about behavior of children, have we ever, this might be a loaded question, I didn't think of.
Yeah, that's all right.
Have we ever thought about bringing parents involved in these behavior, asking parent input in, or reviewing some of the ideas that we're thinking about in terms of behaviors that we're teaching kids? I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a loaded question.
No, it's a great question, and depending on what resource you look at, they talk about, does parent involvement, community involvement, at what place do those people come in? For us, we wanted to get started from a staff perspective, but one of the other important elements to PBIS, to your earlier question, is data collection and data review, and ultimately response to that data. So as you put these expectations in place, are you collecting data along the way to be able to say, is it working? We're saying that this is what you're supposed to do in the cafeteria, but is that working? Are we seeing issues in the cafeteria? And if we are, what can we do to respond to that? So some of that data that's collected along the way, I would anticipate being perhaps some climate surveys that include parent perspectives, or more anecdotal from parents as well. But I see them definitely playing a role in that sense. Great questions. So we touched on this a little bit, but the second action step there, continue developing understanding of behavior support practices for all levels of student need. As I said, we've really been focused on Tier 1 because unless we have a solid foundation there, it's hard to be able to talk about what else should we be doing for other students that need more. But as we've created that solid foundation this year, the district committee will be more focused on, okay, now let's look at Tier 2 and Tier 3. What should our Tier 2 and Tier 3 responses to behaviors of concern look like in 2023, 2024? And quite frankly, that looks very different than when I started 21 years ago. So how can we all continue to learn and grow in that, and then be able to put systems in place to be able to support that?
I have another question with this. Can you help me understand how it works with Tier 1, with secondary, where you can't, like what great acronyms you can use in the elementary programs and really hokey, I think, if you're a 7th grader, right?
Yeah.
Or how do they kind of set those expectations?
That's a great question because, quite frankly, as you go up in grade levels, you see the research and the experts out there struggle more and more with what should it look like. I think our middle school has done a great job over the years in dabbling with what some things could look like. When you see the CATS code is kind of there at the middle school level, that's their version of the communicate with respect, achieve personal goals, tackle challenges, serve others at the elementary level. So there are some things that you can do, but again, it comes down to what are your expectations? How are you communicating them? Are you collecting data on how they're doing with those? And then how are you responding to that data? So even though it might not look like a fancy cheer, you can still be saying, and I know both at the high school and middle school, they've done this, what are some problem areas that we see right now in the building that we need to be able to address and just tighten up expectations on. So it's a little bit more of a gray answer. I think it is gray at the secondary level, but I think that's what they're going to be looking at this year, is how can we make this come to life at secondary. All right, so goals 3 and 4, I'll give you a moment to read both of those goal statements: school environments that support belonging and student and staff wellness. So school environments that support belonging, we'll start there, and both of these are on the same slide because the action steps are more embedded in a lot of the work that we're doing. And I'll talk you through some of the action steps that we're taking in these two areas, but I wouldn't say that they're being met with the same focus as what goals 1 and 2 are being met with this year. But again, lots of good work being done. So our school district will ensure access to learning environments intentionally designed to foster a sense of belonging for all students. And we've talked about this on a number of occasions, but I'll talk about some of it again. But we believe that every single student should have the opportunity to be able to walk through our doors and feel a sense of belonging, have the opportunity to belong here in our schools. And that means that we need to be able to continue to develop our understanding of our students and the experiences that they have, regardless of what background, what color they are, what religion they are, what country they may be from, whatever language that they may speak. We need to understand them better, and ultimately we need to be able to have the courage to look at our systems and be able to identify areas where there may be barriers to students being able to feel a sense of belonging in our buildings. So when we talk about it being intentionally designed for belonging, that means understanding, and that means continuing to examine our systems. Last year we did that, and you supported us in doing that in a very real way with our dress code. Being able to revamp our dress code in a way that is more equitable for all students. And aside from, we know that there were at least one element of discussion and good debate around what we ultimately came up with the dress code. But overall, it was a good thing for kids. And I'm proud of the movement that we made there with that policy. And I think that's an example of how can we adapt systems that we have control over to be better for students. This year, right now, we're doing the same thing with an extracurricular committee, again, that you've supported us putting into place. We've had 2 meetings so far, and I'm excited in 2 weeks from now to be able to share an update with you on the work that group has done so far. We have our 3rd meeting next week, and again, I'll have some updates for you in 2 weeks on where things stand with that. But again, how can we examine the structures we have in place for extracurriculars to make sure that they're accessible for all? Some other things that we've been doing and will continue to do, we continue to send small groups of teachers to Alabama to be able to experience more of the history of discrimination in our country and be able to visit some incredible sites and have some incredible discussion with their colleagues. This past summer, we were able to send some teachers from Elmwood Academy this time, which was new from the year prior. So this year, we're excited to be able to have a similar PD experience for the Elmwood Academy teachers that didn't attend the trip as we did last year for our middle school and high school teachers. We also have been able to continue to expand our services in ELD. So our English language development, Mr. Bingham actually gave a little preview to that earlier, and certainly it's not a preview to you all because you supported Christy Brown being able to move into a position. You've supported our development of a newcomer class, the increase in staffing. So all of that are decisions that were made last year that this year we get to implement and be able to reap the rewards from. And then finally, this goal is certainly connected to PBIS because as students feel belonging to our school and as they feel a pride to being here, that is ultimately going to impact their behaviors. So certainly they're deeply intertwined. In goal 4, when we talk about personal wellness, again, you could make the case quite easily that it's deeply intertwined with goal 3 and with goal 2. But more specifically, last year we had for the first time a support staff wellness fair. We plan on doing that again this year and seeing if that's something that we can continue to expand a little bit more. And I would also say that when we talk about social emotional learning, that is something that, again, continues to be connected to belonging and to behavior. And as our PBIS teams at the building level are getting off the ground, they're having conversations about how does social emotional learning and what we've learned about from CASEL able to inform what we're going to be doing for our positive behavior support plans. So another area that I said I wanted to touch on was this idea of administrative induction. So 3 new building principals, 3 new assistant principals, 3 new district office administrators, and 1 new non-instructional administrator. So that is 10 folks that are in new administrative positions this year. A couple of them previously in the district, but in new positions. But that's a lot of administrative change, and it's something that we need to make sure that we're supporting those folks as they move into those positions. So we have long talked about how do we put an administrative induction plan together similar to or somewhat mirroring our teacher induction plan. We're not required to have an administrative induction plan, but it's something that we believe that we needed to put into place, and certainly now with the number of new folks that we have. So this graphic that you see here, it's based off of a number of experts' work and research. On the left-hand side, new administrators will grow as. That comes from the Pennsylvania Framework for Leadership. So those are the 4 areas: strategic and cultural leadership, systems leadership, leadership for learning, and community leadership. Those are the 4 areas that we get evaluated on each year from the Pennsylvania Framework. So we need new administrators to be able to grow in those 4 areas. But experts in leadership have looked at what are some of the kinds of experiences that really help to grow, particularly building principles, but what are the kinds of experiences that help grow leaders? And it's been 4 different kinds of experiences that have been identified in research. Content workshops, so it might be a little more sit and get in that kind of experience. But then how do you apply that learning to new opportunities? So applied learning opportunities. How do you have somebody that comes alongside you to provide you with expert mentoring, perhaps within those applied opportunities and outside of them? And then how do you make sure that you have collaborative opportunities with peers embedded within their workplace? So we've developed, and with big assistance from Mr. Harris in his new role, a plan to be able to have our administrators walking through a set of induction activities, some which will be required for all new administrators, talking about what leadership means in Mechanicsburg. But then there will be some other activities that are more specific to their positions. So if you're someone that has to do budgeting, you're going to have a workshop that you do with Mr. Longwell and with his team. If you're somebody that is supervising and evaluating staff, you're going to have a workshop geared towards that. You're also going to have a mentor that's coming alongside you as you're going through that supervision process to be able to coach you and help you with what you're doing. So a number of opportunities that our new administrators will be going through with that. I'm really excited about it. We have some of our administrators who are more veteran administrators saying, I'd kind of like to do some of those things as well, because I really think it's going to be a positive for our folks. And lastly, as we talk about our goals and looking ahead to this year, we want to continue to identify how should we be held accountable. And we've talked about, in the past, we talked about John Tanner and the work that we did around what was first called true accountability, and then it was called benefits-based accountability. We've been able to learn a lot from our work with John Tanner and the collaborative districts that we worked with. ultimately at this point, it's about us putting it into practice. So you might not hear us talk as much about John Tanner or those particular terms because we're looking at it more from the perspective of local accountability. The question is, how do we continue to think about accountability differently and think about what should the evidence look like that we're either making progress or we're not making progress, and then how do we respond to that? So trying to identify and examine evidence of progress towards goals and mission of the district, and continuing to work on communicating that progress to tell our story. We've done what started out as quarterly reports, and then we've tried to sync it up with some natural breaking points of the year to continue to bring data to you. We're going to continue to play with that and bring you new data to be able to look at and hear about, and for us to be able to try and tell our story to you.
Well, and related to that, the progress towards the goals, how we're picking those goals.
Yeah.
To determine that they're really high enough and stretch goals and not like, I think that's a real opportunity for us because it's such a new measurement area.
I think that's fair.
So, because you said we might hear less about Tanner, are we sort of going in a slightly different direction than the original thought?
I think
making them up kind of thing.
Yeah, I think what we hope to get from John Tanner, we've got.
Okay.
Now
Yeah.
it's application,
Yeah.
if you will. And obviously he thought we got it too because he asked us to present with him at the state Christmas conference. So that was Joe Underkoff, actually my two co-presenters are here, Joe Underkoff and Dave Harris, and I went down and we joined him at the state principals conference. Actually, was the keynote he was part of. So no, we're not veering from it. In fact, he would be the first to tell you this isn't about John Tanner. This is about your community and what does your community want in terms of the hopes and dreams for their kids. I think that's how that's how we build our comprehensive plan. So now we need to say, okay, how do we stretch ourselves? How do we hold ourselves accountable?
That's it, but happy to take any other questions that I saw.
I want to commend you and your team on your focus, particularly on goals 3 and 4. I know words like inclusion and belonging have been kind of made light of in some circles or reacted to strongly, and I feel like you all are doing a very good job at balancing a focus on education with also a focus on some of the softer elements that I think are represented in goals 3 and 4 that I think increasingly we can't ignore if we're going to educate. So I really feel like you all have walked that line well. Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Betts? Or Dr. Lyden? Thank you for your report. Move on to item 3.02, capital area intermediate unit. Mr. Bradley.
Yes, the intermediate unit meeting was August 24th, so it was before school really started and really took place. But a lot of what was discussed was the programs over the summer and the things that were occurring over the summer. Early intervention and continuing education was very big. Lots of professional development. Again, they took another swipe at revising the orientation and programming for new staff. So to somewhat like we did for the new administration, they continually went back to look at and revise what they've been doing for new staff onboarding and figuring out what's working and things that can be improved upon. Started working on programming that they would offer for the different for the districts, and starting to get things lined in for that. It was the day after they had done the Hilltop red carpet approach. They had done a different thing for first day, kind of made a red carpet for everybody coming in, and it was well received by the staff and the students as they were coming in for a little bit of an uplift. General maintenance stuff. Transportation continues to be an issue, just like most of the other districts. Most districts are having the transportation, so they're working to look at that. Over the summer, they rolled out new payroll system and some new personnel tracking systems, so they've been having challenges with that, continue to work on that, but they think they've got a good handle on it. And then they're working and focusing in on literacy and different things that they can do to continue to help out literacy and move along. And then the last thing they talked about was seeing funding for Afghanistan refugees. That's becoming a very heavy demand for the IU, and getting funding for that and figuring out how to assist them and bring them and develop more community connections with the group to help the transition into the schools. So lots of focus on that. And that's all I have to report.
Questions for Mr. Bradley? Thank you for your report. Move on to item 3.03, Cumberland Perry Area Career Technical Center report, Mr. Sanger.
Thank you. JOC met on August 28th along with committee work where we looked at the idea of increasing substitute pay to try and keep up with our surrounding districts. We heard some out-of-the-box ideas to try and think about what to do after the construction project's done, and we continued wait list that may exist even after we expand the facility. In the main board meeting, we reviewed a report that the administration prepares each year, a lot of different metrics and things like that deal with NOCTI scores, attendance, program participation, post-graduation survey, a lot of info and really helpful. I always say to Mr. Bruin, like, why do you have to share so much? Like, I get like 75 pages in every like board thing, and he reminds me that we don't live in the CTC. You know, like we live in our own sending districts and kind of are closer to it, and this is the, just a good reminder of everything. So it's good to see and hear and kind of focus in on all those things. And as I was thinking of that, that's why I sent out to everyone today just program information about attendance between or enrollment at the beginning of the year. Just on the idea of enrollment, what you saw, what I sent out today was about 1,300 students, which is amazing just at the beginning of the year. For comparison, in 2010, 2011, the enrollment was 917 students. So really a tremendous growth over the last 12, 13 years. And again, we talked about the wait list beyond that. So a real continued need that it's a problem, but a good problem to have, right? Versus the alternative. So focusing in then just on the building project, just to update the board, a conversation that Mr. Longwell and Dr. Lighty and Mr. Rupp and I had in between meetings here was regarding how the district would fund, how we would contribute to the building project. There was a decision point on whether or not we were going to fund our contribution in cash or be a part of the bond issue. And after Greg knows more than I do on what makes the most sense for the district, but we've chosen to contribute in cash for our piece of the overall project, which I think it would have been fine either way. The reason there was a decision point was just to try and help size the bond issue when it goes out, which won't be until next year. Things just seem to, it's a very long timeline with the way things work with this project. So just to let you know that. The next meeting is September 25th. I plan to attend that. That concludes my report.
Any questions on Mr. Sanger's report, or do you have any comments, Mr. Longwell, on the bond issue? Or
Yeah, I think when we looked at it, we did look at it, the totality of what projects we might have of our own, but also being cognizant of, we're still finishing up the borrowing on our own construction projects. And when you look at the principal versus the principal and interest that we'd otherwise have to pay for the CTC's project, we felt better to pay the cash that we have out of the capital reserve fund and then continue to focus on our construction projects and wrapping those up. So.
And that was gonna be my question, because I know that right-hand column, we still have cash to make up, last I saw from our evaluations. And so even seeing that, I mean, I anticipate the state funding balanced that out, and so maybe that's why our opinion's different about having cash available to fund this project.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And to your point, that is something we've talked a little bit about this fall, is that we want to go back and, you know, we kind of kept a running history, if you will, for the financing plan, and we just kept on building it larger and larger to show the history of what we borrowed and how are we budgeting. But I think now that we're getting down to the last borrowing, it might be better to go back and say, let's just kind of overhaul the look of this, just summarize the total borrowing today, what's the one borrowing that's left, and then true up that last column to say, where are we now based on, you know, we've been on this journey and now we're to the last leg of it, and, you know, how are the numbers falling based on current market conditions and also the budget.
This will be our most expensive borrowing, interest rates.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be higher
Keeping up every
this one.
I'll just add, we had a rather spirited superintendent's meeting yesterday. Wade described it around the wait list and the fact that as a region, we're one of the fastest growing regions on the East Coast, and as dire as the need is for the building project alone is not going to address the amount of students on that wait list. And so I'm glad to hear that that's also happening at the JOC level, because I think we're going to have to be creative in what we offer for kids that would benefit greatly and just aren't getting in. And that's a shame. And it's not just in Mechanicsburg, it's across the region.
Brendan and I were talking about that today. We had a call anyway. It's just, it was a preview of what was happening, but you know, I told him, like, none of my ideas are so like broad stroke. You need to be, you know, the superintendents and the administration at the CTC are the only ones who understand the real, like, well, it's an AM enrollment versus PM enrollment, and this district does this and this district does that. It's really there's a lot of moving parts, and to try and understand how to do anything different or in a different way than we've done it is worth exploring, but definitely not as easy as saying, oh, yeah, well, right here, I got a classroom over here, right, put some kids in.
And I know it's not that easy, but it would be nice to see them get outside that box of the AM and the PM, and you send students in the PM, and that's your area. I would love to see it modularized, even almost like a college curriculum where you can take a course and rotate it for a course and then rotate back out.
I thought about that too with our block scheduling. It worked really well for us, and the other being 15 minutes away works really well for us. But then Wes Perry was in this committee meeting, and she was saying, you know, we changed this, we changed that. Like, kids are on the bus for an hour, so like each way. So you know, you got to make their time here worthwhile, and you know what I mean. Like the 3-hour block is important for everybody in different ways. But I take your point. It's you know, I wasn't in club sitting there thinking, it's an hour to, you know, to get there, and it's just as long for Upper Adams or some of the other places. So
It doesn't mean I don't think we can't pilot stuff with West Shore and TV and Mechanicsburg that are close to try some of that initial stuff to see if it even will work before you try to upset the apple cart, to your point, for a whole hour commute.
Yeah.
You know, that might be scary talk, but I think you pilot
not
stuff.
to me, so I hope you all talk about it more and find some interesting ideas.
They piloted with Cumberland Valley a project and we weren't offended, so I think.
Yeah, so I like how you categorize it as a good problem, because we've seen a significant increase in our students' interest in that school.
But that skill set is so key, and if there's an opportunity to just dock into a little bit of it for a lot more students, I think that would be fabulous.
Further comments from Mr. Sacker? All right, Mr. Sacker, thank you for your report. Item 3.04, PSBA legislative report. Just want to report that The annual delegates assembly is on November 4th. Brian and I are the delegates who will be attending it either. This year it's hybrid, you can attend it either live or online. Generally, we just do the online now, depending on where they hold it, it's up to him. And also the annual conference, which used to be in Hershey, is also coming up next month, but it's now in Galahari. Yeah. So, I mean, unless if you see something that really piques your interest, you know, I don't think I'll be attending it. Brian will be up somewhat at the job. But it's open to all of us. Like you see a seminar. It's funny because Brian said to me tonight something I realized years ago when it was in Hershey, and I would go every years. Every seminar I went to is we either were already doing or we had analyzed what they were talking about and determined it wasn't for us. And that's not a credit to us, but it was a credit to Dr. Leidy, Dr. Van Drew, and Julie, and the people that were already ahead of the time at that time, that were ahead of the 8 ball so much that it's like, why am I sitting here? I should be presenting it of why we either accepted this or didn't. And actually, I know Dr. Leidy and Dr. Van Drew had actually presented something. And that was always interesting.
I think you guys should do like, take a Thursday session, wherever the end of the session, and do like, treat the other ones as like before, and this is like after.
Right.
You know, 5 years after, this is how great these things turned out, or what we learned.
Does AAA even have a presenting? Is you still have to pay? Normal conferences, when you present, you get free attendance.
Not there.
That's not how that works, and I just don't know what the incentive is to go and present there if you have to pay to attend the conference to present.
Right.
From a taxpayer's perspective.
I agree. It is interesting to go when one of our administrators is presenting. Support them, and, you know, just to kind of hear what other board members and other superintendents. So it's been a few years. You haven't done that actually for a while.
I'm not supportive of it when you have to pay. I don't like that.
So that's all I have on the legislative report. Any questions or any additional legislative comments? Anybody has seen, heard? Okay, we'll move on to item 3.05, Finance Facilities Committee report, Mr. Sanker.
Yes, the committee did not meet, but a number of items were discussed in the work session that are on the agenda for this evening. I just wanted to call that out to note that this is the second, a view of these things that we're going to be approving tonight under 901 and 902, the auditorium lighting at middle school and District 5 roof.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Sanker? Move on to item 3.06, Board President Report. I'd like to announce an executive session was held on August 22nd, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. for safety matters. And announce an executive session held on September 12th, 2023 at 6 p.m. for student and safety matters. Move on to item 6, new business, athletics, recreation. Item 6.01, Dr. Lebo.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the fall recreation programs and staff for payroll and audit purposes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Well.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 6.02, Dr. Lebo.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the spring athletic coaches for the 2023-2024 school year.
A second.
Second.
Further discussion? I'd again just like to thank those in the board who made the recommendations to go to this, doing it like every third as opposed to doing it all at once. Sometimes it's too early or too late, and it's why there's 9 of us here. And I think that actually came up out of the committee and some of the members that were on the athletic committee. I think it's worked out extremely well.
Who are the board members on that?
Well, originally it was Dr. Rhodes and Mr. Hartman. And that was their suggestion to go to the hiring and approving it ahead of time by the season, the season ahead of time.
Oh, okay, I thought you were referring to.
Well, actually, it came about as a result, you were also on that committee.
I thought you were referring to the current.
No, this is the,
Okay, sorry, yes.
I just think every time we do it, I think, wow, this is so much nicer. It's better to do it
It's
this
just
way.
relevant.
Everybody knows who the coach is gonna be, and you're actually approved prior to the practice starting, or it's not already over, or what happens.
It's relevant.
So, any further discussion? Mr. Manuel.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7, new business, budget and finance. Item 7.01, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the treasurer's report as per the attachments, which include the following. The treasurer's report for August 2023, board budget report for August 2023, general fund invoices paid 8/9/2023 through 9/11/2023, check numbers 66652 through 66854 in the amount of $1,078,416.97. Electronic payments in the amount of $7,497,369.25. General fund invoices payable check numbers 66855 through 66867 in the amount of $198,496.34. Capital Reserve Fund invoices paid check numbers 1863 through 1872 in the amount of $762,101.40. Series of 2020 Construction Fund invoices paid checks number 269 through 274 in the amount of $945,114.17. Series of 2022 Construction Fund invoices paid checks numbered 130 through 134 in the amount of $1,054,930.76. Series of 2023 Construction Fund invoices paid check numbers 101 through 114 in the amount of $2,873,149.87. And 10, the investment portfolio.
We have a second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.02, Mr. Burkhardt.
I ask the board to approve the transportation services contract with Faithful Transportation LLC as per the attachment.
We have a second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 7.03, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the tax policies report as presented in the attachment.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 8, new business curriculum. Item 8.01, Mrs. Maris.
Make a motion for the board to approve the student services contracts as presented in the attachment.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 9, new business facilities. Item 9.01, Mr. Sanker.
Make a motion to award project bids for the auditorium lighting project at Mechanicsburg Middle School as presented in the project summary attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 9.02, Mr. Sanker.
I make a motion to award project bids for the district fiber replacement project in the amount of $60,900 to Lear Electric as presented in the attachment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 10, new business personnel. 10.01, Mr. Bradley.
I'd ask the board to approve the personnel report as per the attachments.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 11, new business policy. Item 11.01, Mr. Hartman.
I move to adopt the agreement and waiver of hearing before the Board of Directors between parent, student, and the board, and the terms and conditions set forth therein. Direct the superintendent to place said agreement in students' educational records. Authorize the superintendent to act on behalf of the board in implementing the agreement and order the expulsion of the following students. Student A of 23-24 as a permanent expulsion from the district. Student B of 2023-24 as a permanent expulsion from the district.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion?
I always comment on this thing because every time we, as a board, deal with this issue, I think we always take into consideration that we're dealing with children of different ages. I just want to commend the district as a whole. Whenever we do this, it's always about the student and the student's future and what's best for the student. We never bring in emotion or anything that would cloud our ability to do what's best for the student. So I always like to say that when we do this, because it's, I hate to do this, but I know that the district handles this in such an appropriate manner, in a professional manner, that's only geared and only focuses on the students and their well-being. So I commend us in how we handle this.
I concur with everything you said. Thank you for your comment. Any other discussion? Mr. Longwell.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 13, hearing of visitors. We have reached the second opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents of the school district. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you would like to address the board, please come up to the podium and share your district name and address. This is for any public comment on items that were not on the agenda and not voted on. Seeing none, item 14, Mrs. Barrett.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
The second,
Second.
meeting is adjourned.